Story 1, C6. I remember it as clear as if it was yesterday, although it's been several years. Back then we were all so naive, believing ourselves to be alone in the universe. Some even went as far as to say we were at the peaceful center of it. But that day, everything changed. I awoke that morning to find the world just as I'd left it the day before. The sky was gray and softly weeping. A less than gentle breeze swayed the trees and plants, bending some to their limits, but not quite breaking them. Despite the day starting as it always had, there was an uneasiness that I couldn't shake. Now I know that most who know me would tell you I'm slightly more paranoid than others my age, but that time was different. The air was slightly heavier than usual. The food and drink I had for breakfast left a bitter aftertaste in my mouth, and even the moods of the ones I called family seemed unnaturally low. It was as if the whole world, or at least the part that I lived in, could feel it coming. The heavy, suffocating atmosphere in my home threatened to drag me to the depths that my family had already been acquainted to. So I'd opted to go outside. I figured a brisk walk would help me clear my mind and possibly help with the restlessness in my chest. I was fortunate to have been born in a privileged family. Our home was rather large, and the area behind it, which some might call a garden, but I liked to call our forest, was my standard refuge. When I wanted to escape from the house, this was where I went. In the heart of our silent and tranquil forest, there was a small clearing, a perfect circle that I requested to be made specifically for me. None of my other family members ever came into our forest, so my parents didn't argue much about it. So there I was, at my special, quiet place in the heart of our forest. When a faint rumbling touched my ears, I turned, thinking that perhaps an animal had darted into the confines of our land. But the forest was as deadly silent as it had always been. The rumbling, still barely intelligible, sounded again, and I finally noticed that it came from the thick deck of gray clouds high above my head. Not once in my lifetime had we had a storm. Not even my parents had lived long enough to have experienced that kind of weather. Part of me was afraid, but the larger part of me was curious. So I sat there as I stared at the sky. When the first streak of bright light flashed across the sky, from horizon to horizon, I stared in awe. It wasn't until the low rumble from before erupted in a cacophony of what can only be described as roaring that the fear took over. The roar crashed down from the sky and trembled me to my very core. That was when I ran. I ran as fast as I could, being careful not to trip over or slam into any obstacles. High above me I could see lights flashing back and forth, the entire sky lighting up as if the star that our planet circled around was shining through the gray clouds. I saw then descend. Strange metal objects coated in fire broke through the gray canvas of the sky, and in the distance I could hear them crashing into the ground. When I finally reached the border of our forest, a gigantic metal contraption had nestled itself in a clear area of our garden. Its coating of fire had already dissipated, but it still smoldered as if it had been touched by the fires of my darkest nightmares. The metal contraption opened on one side, and I remember it walking out. It was the first of them that I had ever seen in my life, and it would surely not be the last. Its eyes, with pupils of a size I'd never seen before, were oddly positioned on what could only have been its head. There were patches of a string-like material on the topmost part of its head, and thin strips of this string lining the upper part of its eyes. Below the eyes was a part I still don't know the name of, but it had a pair of holes similar to our ears, and its ears were strangely protruding from the side of its head. The only thing about its head that seemed normal was its mouth. Assuming the opening at the bottom of the face was its mouth, its front legs had worm-like appendages on the ends, and it only used its hind legs to stand and walk. The first of them walked to my family, who had moved themselves outside out of curiosity, and began producing horrific sounds. Its tones varied from low to high, and the coarseness of it nearly made my ears bleed. I could see my family grab the sides of their heads and scream in agony. The things seemed shocked or startled, and their front legs grabbed something from their backs, pointing whatever it was at my family. As I stood there, half hidden behind the vegetation of our forest, I watched my family slowly go up in flames. Their terrified screeching filled what was left of my ears and saturated me with numbness. The numbness saved my life because it clenched my lungs and stopped me from screaming. It didn't last for very long, but at the time it had felt like an eternity of torture. That was my first encounter with them. This vicious bipedal species has long since taken over our world, and even today their ships still rain from the sky. They build their square homes of wood, stone, and metal, and they eat our plants and our animals. This cruel and unforgivable species that has killed so many of my kin. I will not rest until all of these humans are dead. Story 2. The girl. It felt like the short time after one wakes up from a nap. It feels as if everything is not real, as if you are still not fully awake. I opened my eyes and found myself placed in this scene straight out of a thriller. I found myself standing in the middle of what looked like an alleyway. It felt like the aftermath of a fall storm. I took a breath, but all I felt was the cold, crisp air cutting the inside of my lungs. The sky was an unattractive shade of gray which coincidentally matched the cold, wet pavement. I could see about 50 feet into this, only the rest was covered in a heavy fog. This fog laid so close to the ground that only the top of the building were visible. I looked down and noticed the pavement was cracked in several spots, creating vein-like cavities all through this road. It gave me a sense that this was a forgotten road, that nobody had walked, nonetheless driven, through this road in years. As I looked at my surroundings, I tried to take in all of the details of this scene, but found my senses muted. My eyes saw everything, but my brain could not process the information correctly. I turned my head to the left where an old brick wall stood. The brick was barely visible. Dirt and mold covered most of its surface. I could tell this wall stood tall many years ago, but now it was only the skeleton of a building. The top of the wall was jagged and broken. Time became its worst enemy. There was a large vine coming from the pavement rising against this brick wall, like a big giant claw reclaiming its territory. It was only a matter of time until this mighty wall lost its battle against nature. I slowly shifted my head to the right and saw what was left of an old garage. The metal door was crippled by time and weather. It was bent with the metal framing sticking out in every direction. It reminded me of a homeless animal, sick and hurt. Many years ago this door was white, but the white faded and rust had dimmed its bright glow. It became jagged to the touch and my finger got caught on the hinge. I watched the small trickle of blood slowly fall from my finger and hit the cracked pavement. It fell into a small circle, and ants swarmed it like they haven't ate in months. I moved forward through the door and left the ants to their feast. Behind the door I could only see the darkness streaming out. I found it strange that I could see darkness, and light became obsolete. It was intriguing to my eyes. Its once concrete floor was now littered with debris and dried-out leaves from the many autumns the vine across the street had to suffer. The room's smell was almost unbearable, and yet so familiar. I've been here before. The rest of the street was covered in thick, hazy fog. I turned my head to face the street, and to my surprise I found myself staring at the only color in this death scene: red. Every sense in my body screamed of fear. I could feel the hairs on my skin slowly rising as I saw this small figure materialized in front of me. As a gust of wind moved through my feet, the fog was pulled back like a curtain to reveal the figure. It was a little girl. At first I thought she was walking towards me, but her feet did not move. After a while she seemed to stop. The heavy fog seemed to dance around her feet as if it was delicate silk. There was nothing about her appearance that I needed to be scared of. She was wearing a red dress. The hem made a large circle around her knees. She had her hair braided with a white ribbon tying the end. She looked fragile and innocent. I wanted to help her, to approach her, but something inside of me stopped me. She looked at me. There was no anger, no excited, no fear. There was nothing in her eyes that resembled the least bit of emotion. I was more than certain that my face resembled nothing but terror. I felt incredibly uncomfortable, but I had no idea why. Every bone in my body, every thought through my head told me to run. Instead, I stood there, still. It was as if my body stopped responding. I was paralyzed. I looked at this girl and wondered what she was doing in this way. I began to think she was lost and needed help getting back home. Wherever that might be, I never stopped to think. What was I doing there? I had no recollection of getting there, or why I was there. A moment later my stomach sank, and I realized who she was. This little girl was me when I was 8. This was the alley behind my house. This was my childhood. It took what seemed a lifetime until I managed to feel my legs again. I took a step towards her. She quickly blinked. Next thing I know, she was charging towards me. All I could see was pure concentration, and, for that matter, evil in her face. She opened her mouth as if to scream, but instead she revealed her perfectly sharpened teeth, ready to attack. I remember backing away, that all I saw was her mouth getting closer to my face. I remember falling to the ground, her on top of me, and the darkness of her throat. I laid there as I heard the sound of my flesh ripping apart in small, imperfect pieces, my bones broken in single, swift snaps. I felt as if I being submerged in water, but I realized I was drowning in my own blood. The pain was like a fire roaring in what was left of my body. I closed my eyes, then I woke up. Story 3, The Blooming. Millie, wake up. Come on. It's your birthday. Today's a very special day. You're 18. Mom's working, so you get to spend the whole day with me. Meet me in the living room when you're ready. My sister Elena sings cheerfully at me. I'm shaking my mattress. I get out of bed and stare in my mirror with a disheartening annoyance. My mousy brown hair lays as limp as death, and my eyes are so unremarkable that barely anyone knows what color they are. My spindly frame, flat like a boy's, leaves a lot to be desired. I'm not the prettiest of girls where I come from, and definitely not as beautiful as Elena. She's 27 and has been perfect since well before I was born. Every hair and curve perfectly in place. I don't hate her for it like some sisters would. She's always been more like a confidant and mother figure to me. I trudge down the stairs and pour some cereal into a bowl. Elena's perched on a chair, her eyes brimming with excitement. She starts, and before I even sit down, "Okay, Millie, what I'm going to tell you may sound strange, but today your life changes completely." Yeah, I know. I interrupt. Today I'm legally an adult. I'm now legally able to be held accountable for all of my decisions, along with the tidal wave of card offers that could suck me into debt. Elena's face gets serious and she cuts me off. "No, well, I mean, yes, but that's not what I'm talking about now. You know the women in our family have always been a little different, right?" I nod in agreement. It's true. The lineage of women we come from were all strikingly beautiful, independent, and strong-willed. I didn't see what the subject had to do with my coming of age, though, she continued. Well, every Valentine's Day after our 18th birthdays, something called the blooming takes place. It sounds weird, but hear me out. You were born on February 13th, so there's not much time to teach you everything. Once again I interrupt her. It's a habit of mine. Elena, what are you talking about? I'm too tired for this right now. Stop being so cryptic and weird. Millie, I'm serious. Damn it. Listen to me. She pounds her fist down on the table in front of me, then smooths out the tablecloth, trying to soften the gesture. Go out tomorrow and find the right man. If you feel one drawing your spirit near, that's the one you want, she went on explaining. In spite of my incredulous expression, meet him for a date and let him take you home. Make sure he lives alone. There are several ways to find out without being obvious. Let nature take its course, and call me the next day. Tell me everything. I say something to her about my first time being special with someone I loved. Yet by this point she has her hands on my shoulders and is looking into my eyes. So I did as she told me. A tall, handsome man caught my eye the next night. I pretended that it was still my birthday. I'm amazed at how easy this is. He seems captivated by everything I say. The lines flow smoothly off of my tongue. My giggles are provocatively placed with perfection. After some slight prodding, I find out that he lives alone, so I let him take me home. Our chemistry continues to build, and as expected, nature took its course. It was 100% new to me, yet my body knew exactly what to do, what I liked and didn't like. Being able to know what his body liked, it was euphoric. I wake up the next day a bit sore but happy. He's still lying there beside me peacefully, his back to me. I snuggle him, and he feels like cold marble against my skin. I roll him over and uncover him, eyes open, no pulse. He looks withered, like a grape left in the hot sun. This hulking man from last night was reduced to such frailty, his skin almost dust-like. A slight smile rests on his thin, mummified lips. Not knowing what else to do, I call Elena in a panic and give her the address. After all, she told me she wanted to hear all about it afterwards. Besides, my sister's the one who told me to do this in the first place. This is her problem now, too. If anyone knows how to help me, It's her. I can't go to my mother with this or call the police. What would I even say? I'd be known as the dead lay girl for the rest of my existence. And that's if I manage to avoid a murder charge. I'm losing it. I can't even look at him. What the hell did this? There's a knock at the door. After checking the peephole and seeing my sister's face, I open it. Elena is smiling widely, completely calm. Tears are streaming down my face in horror. Elena, help me. What did I do wrong? I did exactly what you told me to do. What's wrong with me? Why is he dead? My life is over. I start clawing at my hair, my voice becoming unrecognizable with hysteria. She gathers me into a hug and starts to chuckle. Your life is not over. His is, and nothing. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. I look at her, more confused. I start to yell and scream at her, but this time she's the one to interrupt me. Millie, stop. Go look in the mirror. I go into his bathroom and look at myself. My eyes are blue like the Caribbean, my hair a flowing mane of chestnut curls, and my body curvaceous and beautiful, my skin utterly flawless and perfectly complected. I feel the power of his essence within my breath. Now I understand. I understand everything. I'm getting the hang of it now, and things are going to be so much fun. Story 4. Don't sleep facing the mirror. I had just come home from a tiring day. I had to stay in school until 8 because I had failed a math test and had to go for extra lessons. I was so freaking tired. Mom and Dad were overseas for a little vacation for a few days, so I was all alone at home. I was brushing my teeth while looking at myself in the mirror. It was a beautiful circular mirror with intricate designs on the glass. Mom bought it for $100 at an auction. It had been in our house for a few years. I remembered how as a little kid Mom would tell me an old Chinese superstition. You must never sleep facing a mirror, she warned me, or your soul will go into the mirror and live in it. A part of me dismissed her words as a chunk of nonsense, but another part of me believed her, and hence there were no mirrors in my bedroom. I proceeded to bend down and rinse my mouth. What I saw when I looked up again had me shell-shocked for the rest of my life. My face in the mirror wasn't my face in the mirror. It was the face of a girl with big, really big, white eyes and long black hair. And her lips were redder than the reddest of lips. Blood was dripping down her chin and onto her white dress. Her white eyes had that bloomy look about them. It was almost as if she looked really sad. I wanted to reach out to touch her, to tell her everything was okay, that nothing was going to go wrong. I felt like I was partially hypnotized. Thick lights in the bathroom went off. That snapped me out of my little trance. I jumped, taken aback. Suddenly, the girl in the mirror said in a high-pitched, girly, sinister voice, I need to escape out of this mirror. Help me. I tried to move a step back, but to no avail. I tried to move the rest of my body, but couldn't. I made an attempt to scream, but nothing came out of my mouth. I could only watch the girl, half-snake, move 3 inches closer towards me in the mirror. At any moment now, she would probably get out of the mirror like how the long-haired girl from that horror movie got out of the television and kill me. No, that was not going to happen. Mentally teetering on the verge of panic, I struggled even hotter than before. I tried to turn around and run. Still, nothing happened. The girl continued to inch closer towards me in the mirror. Shit, any moment now. But she didn't sleep for sing. This mirror Tony ate, and you will not suffer. And she vanished, and her place was me. Me, sweating like I had just run a 40-kilometer marathon, with eyes wide like saucers, but still me. I tried to move my arms, and it worked. It worked. I could move my legs, my head, my knees, my whole entire fucking body. I had never been so relieved, but that relief was soon replaced by what the girl or snake or whatever had told me just now. No, I wasn't going to sleep facing the mirror tonight. No way. I would rather go to school naked than sleep facing a mirror. I would rather eat shit and sleep facing a fucking mirror. All of that, the girl, the mirror, whatever, was probably a nightmare I had. I looked into the mirror again, seeing my own reflection. I was fully convinced that it was all nothing and rinsed my mouth, changed into my PJs, and went to bed. That was probably the best decision I had ever made in my whole entire fucking life. I woke up the next day to find out I wasn't on my bed. It didn't take me long to find out that I was in a hospital. Bandages were all over my body. Some were even covering the bottom half of my face. Suddenly, the memory of the terrifying nightmare I had during the previous night came flooding back into my head, and I began to wonder what happened after that. Why did I even end up in the hospital? I tried to call out for a nurse, but all that came out of my mouth was a noise which sounded like a chicken was being strangled. A nurse appeared beside me. "Oh, you've woken up," she said in a cheery voice. "I'm sorry, but part of your house was burned down last night. The firemen rescued you just in time. Your mom and dad have booked flight tickets back here. You could have died back there. You know, the police thought that everything else and that part of your house was gone in the fire, but they were wrong. They managed to find a circular mirror which wasn't even burnt in your bathroom. Just about everything else and that part of your house was either badly burnt or gone." My eyes widened. The nurse chuckled. "I know, right? I guess the mirror is a magical one. Ha ha. Anyway, your mom and dad decided they didn't want it anymore because it seemed like the mirror had been giving them bad luck ever since they bought it. According to what I had heard yesterday, they wanted to get rid of it. They were really busy, so they kept forgetting about it until the fire happened. When they found out that the mirror was the only thing in that part of your house that wasn't either badly burnt or reduced to ashes, they were so shocked that they decided to sell it to a friend who was interested in mirrors." She shrugged. "You okay?" I nodded. "Good. I'm going to attend to the other patients. If you need anything, call me." "Okay." She smiled and walked away. So there you go. A creepypasta with a nice ending. Just don't ever go to sleep facing a mirror or else. Story 5. The Depths. A cloth of mist draped over the promenade and enshrouded the red brick lift shaft in front of them. The glossed red doors to the entrance were locked. Vonnie shivered and flung her scarf in over her shoulder. The guy from Blackpool Civic Trust had said 7 o'clock, and it was 20 past. She felt Jez's glare almost melt the side of her face. "This was your chuffing idea. I shouldn't be exposed to weather like this. Blackpool prom in February. Damp castles I can handle. But I can't feel my bloomin' feet, Von." He blew into his cupped hands and stamped his feet theatrically. "He'll be here. Stop moaning." She wondered where the Civic Trust guy was. He had seemed keen for slightly haunted to feature the cabin lift. He had contacted them. He would turn up surely. A burst of music came from Vonnie's bag. As she grabbed for her phone, she saw a man in a white shirt approach from across the road. Just a text. I'll get it later. He's here now. Jazz was holding his mobile. It was probably another snipe about the cold. Typical psychic, she thought, a prima donna. He always complained on their fact-gathering trips, but insisted on coming every time. The small, lean man beamed. Hello there. I'm Edward. Pleased to meet you. If you'd like to follow me, I'll take you down now. Edward rooted round in his sack-like pockets and pulled out a huge bunch of clanging keys. Jez tutted and rolled his eyes. In your own time. It's not as if we've been stood here long, is it? Jez rolled his eyes and tutted. Edward didn't seem to notice and waved the key around with triumph. A few minutes later, Jez's mouth by this point resembled a cat's backside. He folded his arms with a loud sigh. Vonnie chuckled as Edward unlocked the door and swung it open. It creaked and scraped the floor. Jez lagged behind as they entered the windowless corridor. It wasn't completely dark outside yet. The surrounding mist made Vonnie feel wrapped in cotton wool. It was a relief to step into the echoing entrance. Ahead stood the lift door, vintage but in pristine condition. Jez shifted his weight between his feet and held back as Edward ushered them into the open mouth of the lift. So, who was it that designed this place? She smirked at Edward. It was a gentleman called John Charles Robinson, he replied. It was built in 1930. As you can see, it's designed to carry folk down Bispham Cliffs to the lower promenade. It's not used anymore. Shame, really. He slid the concertina lift door shut with a clatter. Inside, the light glowed amber. Vonnie made a mental note of the architect's name. Edward leaned past Jez, who took a step backwards. He pressed a button, and the squealing of old mechanisms began as they journeyed slowly down. Yes, he designed quite a few of the Art Deco buildings in Blackpool. Bispham Library, Stanley Park Cafe, amongst others. This is his least known work. He carried on. He was and still is a much undervalued artist. Vonnie hoped this architect wasn't so undervalued that he wasn't on Google. It did seem creepy enough in here, though, so the night vision cameras would have the desired effect if she could make sure there were no light in the lift. Could the lights be turned off with the lift still running? Jez jumped in with the question before she could ask. Edward turned slowly to the lift controls and smiled mischievously. Of course, he said. The lift went black. Vonnie felt her stomach suddenly rise to her throat as the lift dropped. A shriek came from the lift mechanisms above. Her fingers pressed against the icy metal box around her as she grasped for purchase. It sped up. Faster and faster they plummeted. No help stop. Jez screamed on and on they plunged. Then it stopped. Vonnie crashed to the floor and felt Jez land on her leg. You lunatic, what are you doing? He screeched at Edward. Put the lights on, Edward, please, Vonnie said, her voice wavering. There was no response. Jez pulled Vonnie's arm and clung to her. The sound of the waves smashing against the sea wall grew closer. The sea grew louder. Vonnie felt the box begin to sway as if engulfed in the tide. The acoustics inside the metal casing sounded hollow, as if they were submerged. Jez shrieked and threw himself around the metal box, hammering the walls with his fists. Vonnie felt cool wetness touch her foot, seeping through the lift door. She sobbed and curled into a ball, rocking gently back and forth with the sound of the water trickling inside. The lights flickered and filled the box. Silence. Bonnie looked at the bone-dry floor and stood up quickly. She scanned around, then looked at Jess's puffy red face. They were alone. Jess whimpered and began to wail. Bonnie yanked the lift door open and ran through the dark tunnel to the door. Jess clung limpet-like to her arm. They crashed through the wooden doors back outside to the lower promenade. For a few long seconds they stood under the cool moonlight and stared at the tide far in the horizon. Beyond the damp, empty beach, a screeching gull broke the silence. Without looking back, they ran to their hotel. Jess and Vonnie sat opposite each other in the hotel bar. Neither could make eye contact. Jess held his brandy glass so tightly his knuckles blanched. It was a clever trick, hilarious while they got us good and proper. They've made it on to the next series, he mumbled. Vonnie threw her vodka down her throat in one action, and then thrust her phone in Jess's face. The last text from the Civic Trust said, 7:24 p.m. Sorry can't make IT tonight. Regards, Frank, Story 6. Terminal velocity. I could feel the engines of the ship scream to life as the heads-up display flickered in around me, my hands grasping the control yokes with the kind of sweat that only drips when you're afraid. All the stories ran loose in my mind, pilots throwing up their liquefied organs, faces warped with all the fear and pain of 1,000 lifetimes. But the death of our race was as sure as my own mortality. This was my moment, glory or death. That's what they tell you, until the day that you realize it was never a choice. These were our final stories, and they had to matter not to the universe, but to us. We will die in the fires of war. Amphetamines surging through my veins, I screamed as loud as I could as I saw the tracks ahead of me flare with electricity, my knuckles white upon the controls. Magnetic catapult engaged, said the onboard computer, the ship rumbling around me as it shrieked like a banshee. I started to accelerate, and the airlock at the end of the track opened up into an infinite blackness. I am not a coward. Gripping the throttle as I shot into space at the speed of sound, I wrenched it back, tearing open a wormhole that sucked me into a void of liquid stars. I could feel it even then, the slow prickle of my skin, the writhing doubt in the back of my mind as the pleading faces of my family flickered through my vision. The fall of their worlds as I fled in. Disgrace, the voice spat me forth into a storm of flames, and I backed down as the fiery remnants of a ship swung by overhead. I saw it then, my skull thrumming with pain as I struggled to anchor myself, drifting in darkness above the earth in a haze of shifting matter, black, feathered tendrils and limbs writhed in unison, swimming eternally through a colossal mass of crawling eyes and razor-toothed maws. Images of chaos and death flashed through my vision as I screamed with raw adrenaline, trying to keep my mind from fading as streams of blood dripped from my eyes. But when another squadron tore forward from behind me, I had all the courage I needed. Looking back as I steadied the wings, I saw the capital ships drop out of warp, firing their massive railguns. In a blinding cascade of light, I pulled the control yokes, and my ship jolted forward, picking up speed as its mass dropped to nothing, tearing toward the target as the taste of blood filled my mouth. I hit the triggers, firing my guns again and again with a thunk, thunk, thunk that shook the frigate to its core. Nearing impact, I bowed the ship down, tearing beneath a flame wreath tentacle at impossible speeds before cranking the ship up again, the sheer force threatening to rip my body in two. The warnings on the display flashed red, and I banked to the right as a massive, misshapen hand swept toward me, keeping the ship level. The metal shook with power as I pushed it as fast as it could go, and sped straight between the ravaged flesh of two fingers. Pulling a sharp turn, an unbearable pain shuddered through my mind as the abomination warped and expanded, bending space as it threw off a shockwave of horror and grief. As it hit me, my vision trembled and distended, thrashing violently into a winding cascade of memory and doubt. I could hear myself screaming, firing off random electrical signals in my brain before the narcotic haze dampened the madness with an uncontrollable rage. My muscles jerking and convulsing, my vision ripped back to an advancing current of shifting black eyes that wormed through my mind in a way that could only remind me of rape. I fired another volley as I clenched my bleeding teeth, the cockpit rattling with fury around me as my guns flared in the void. Overwhelmed with fear and adrenaline, as I drew closer to impact, I pulled back the throttle and teleported through the abomination, swallowed instantaneously in a flash of color that I could barely perceive. Its flesh transcended the material world. I could feel it howling within me, screeching in a sickening, otherworldly chaos that needled my skin and flooded my mind with the maddened gibbering of primeval languages. All at once the void parted, and I shot forward into the blackness of space, blood trickling from my mouth as I sped between the rows of capital artillery that cracked like thunder around me. Lost in a haze of confusion and nausea, I felt the sickening lumps of my dissolved intestines wrench up through my throat, and my vomit smacked against the window in a splatter of blood. Space, it rammed into a capital ship at my side, detonating in a fiery explosion that pelted my vessel with burning shrapnel, jagged metal tearing through my ship at the speed of sound. The window shattered into the vacuum. There I drifted, suffocating and strapped into the gutted vessel as I watched the remains of the fleet spiral into madness, watched as the nightmare convulsed, surging its awful form toward the earth before engulfing it entirely. Distant mountains torn from their foundations in clouds of debris, and entire oceans burnt away within fleeting seconds. The matter of our world corroded to dust as the entity swallowed it whole, flaring its tentacles in a blur of shifting motion as the sunlight swam upon its mass, drowning in blackness as my mind bled away from existence. For once in my life I had proven my worth, spiraling down into a void of insignificance, hand in hand with the legacy of my species. For one beautiful, cruel moment in time, we were absolved of our hate, and at last we were together. Story 7. Creek. The inventor was frustrated. He had spent years, decades, researching the nature of time, and his work had finally come to fruition. He had invented a, theoretically, functioning time machine. With this he knew he could silence all the naysayers who had repudiated the underlying goal of his research. They had told him time without number, that time travel was impossible. Otherwise, one could create a paradox by, say, going back in time and killing one's grandfather before he had any children, in which case the time traveler would never even exist, and so wouldn't travel back in time to kill his grandfather, thus ensuring the grandfather's procreation and the time traveler's eventual existence, enabling the latter to go back in time and kill Fa. He had long ago dismissed such nonsense. But as he achieved greater and greater success in his research always, in the comfort of his lab at home rather than at work, the problem grew in his mind. It did not occupy his conscious mind, but his unconscious thoughts were frequently considering it. Time an idea actually manifested itself in his conscious mind. He was essentially already decided on a course of action. Obviously, he had concluded a man could not travel back in time and prevent the circumstances by which he traveled back in time in the first place. Just as obviously, thus the paradox, there would be nothing to stop a man from doing precisely that once he had already traveled back in time. Therefore, both conditions must be true. A man could travel back in time and kill his grandfather, but then he would continue to exist. And upon his return to the present, he would discover that his grandfather had not been killed. Time travel, in other words, would only allow for observation, not interaction. No one would have to worry about accidentally stepping on a bug and somehow causing a volcanic eruption or whatever. This led to important side issues. Were one's actions actually happening somewhere or someone? What would happen if one then got stuck in the past where the apparent event had taken place, etc.? But his subconscious was already working on potential solutions to these questions. As to the main question, he had already decided what to do. Before he would bring his time machine to the attention of his colleagues and the world for that matter, he would first have to divest them of this notion of paradoxes. To this end, he would travel back in time, perform an action that could not have happened, and then return to the present. He would do this with other people so they could verify that he had, in fact, done the impossible act in the past without endangering the present in any way. First, though, he would have to do it alone in order to have empirical verification of a sort in hand before approaching his colleagues. He did not want to kill his grandfather, and was certain his explanation would not be believable if he got stuck 80 years in the past. So instead, he would travel 5 years into the past and kill himself. His self from 5 years ago. That is, if per impossibile he got stuck there, he was pretty sure his presence would prevent any murder accusation from getting off the ground, the alleged victim being alive and well. He took his time machine, which was about the size of a shoebox, and a pistol into the hallway outside his lab, turned the number dial on the time machine to 5, the units dial all the way up to year, the directional switch to past, and activated it. Not much changed, but he hadn't expected it to. He had always relished continuity, which made it a little unusual that he, of all people, would invent a time machine, and so his furnishings had remained almost entirely unchanged over the 30-plus years that he'd been living in. This house he expected to find himself at work in his lab, and so walked over to it. The door was open a crack, and he was able to look in and see that, yes, he was indeed sitting at his desk, looking at something. He raised the pistol, pushed the door open, and before his old self could react to the sound of the creaky hinges, he shot himself in the head. His old self, he paused for a moment to see if he noticed any differences. Did he have any new memories? Did he still exist? Would one notice if one stopped existing? At this last thought, he chuckled, stepped into the room, and then pushed the return button on the time machine. Apart from the disappearance of his body, his old body, and the door closing most of the way behind him, nothing changed. After pausing again to see if he noticed any differences, he didn't. He went over to his desk to record the results of his experiment. He looked at the time machine and called up the exact coordinates it had recorded and began writing them down. But something was wrong. The coordinates were not what they should have been. Not even close. As he finished writing them down, he looked back at the time machine to see what the problem was. The first thing he noticed was that, although he had pushed the directional switch down for past, the switch was sticky and it hadn't clicked over. The second thing he noticed was that while he had turned the category dial all the way up to year, he accidentally pushed it too far. And since the dial had no stopper, it reset to the smallest unit. He hadn't traveled 5 years into the past. He had traveled 5 minutes into the future. And behind him, the door hinges creaked. Bonus stories, Story 1. Pockets. You're walking down a road near to a park. It's dark, cold, and wispy. The moon is slowly emerging through the smoke-like clouds, giving a appealing glow. The wind is harshly blowing towards you, the bottom of your trench coat flapping. The worst of it all, you can't remember why you're walking out this time of night. You just suddenly found yourself walking out the door and decided you must have had a good reason, and this coat seemed new as well. You don't remember wearing a coat like this, yet it seems vaguely familiar. Your gut is telling you that you should carry on. You came out for a reason. If not, you would have left 10 minutes ago. You're always excited about lost or forgotten coats because you always find interesting stuff in the pockets, money, an old letter or drawing, something lost a long time ago. The list was endless. Throughout the walk, you felt a bit of excessive weight in your side pocket and had been saving it for later on. When you opened the zip on the pocket, a horrible smell occurred. You winced at its rotting odor. It smelled of decay and memories. You pull a disgusted face and shakily reach your hand in the pocket. Some sort of horrible, sticky gloop is in there. You can't look down to see what it is, as it had stuck to both sides of the pocket, sticking them tight. Some of it is watery and gloopy, sticks into the grooves of your skin. You quickly pull your hand out, the substance sliding off. You're revolted. It feels like an old jelly or drink left to spoil, or someone's huge glob of chewing gum scrammed in. That must be it, you think. You had gum and stuck it in there, not thinking. You carry on walking, but your curiosity entices you to put your hand in again. Slowly, you take a deep breath and reach. In your hand, it seems relatively the same as before, but as you rummage further, you can feel something more solid now, more defined. You dive your hand in further, getting to the source of this object. You feel it. It's round, definitely squidgy, spongy. You can immediately tell for some reason that this is the thing causing the horrible odor. You feel it further. To bouncy ball, tomato, grape. No, that's not it. Suddenly, an irresistible, realizing grin spreads on your face. It all makes sense now. You can remember why you're walking out, where the coat came from. Oh, how she kicked, and screamed and begged. Yet you simply hushed her and got the knife. Oh, she was a tough one, all right, but you got them. After much squirming and squealing, you got her eyes, another marvelous souvenir of your victims to put in your pocket to see any time. Oh, what fun you had. What was it this time? Ah, yes, a tongue. You'd go out Get yourself a fresh tongue story too. Headphones, I can tell how you're staring there at this screen, finding some enjoyment. You need anything, just anything to keep you awake and entertained. It's late. You're dead tired, but you want to use up every moment. I know how it is. This happens to me, too. Are the sounds on your computer too loud? Don't want to wake your folks. Don't want to get complaints from neighbors, even, whatever, not a problem. Lower the volume on your speakers. Now that doesn't really work for you. Instead, grab some headphones. You walk through the dark with that. Slight paranoia, the old childhood fear of the dark. It never really goes away, but it's all in your head. And you know that. You find your room, you dig through your drawers and your junk to feel for some wires. There they are. Time to head back to the computer. Drop them on your computer desk and go grab a drink of water. Come back and sit down comfortably. Throw on your headphones. You hear a dark ambient sound in the background, a liquid dripping sound, even some metallic grinding there, too. Is it from outside? You take off the headphones, and suddenly the sound goes away. You think for a moment, suspicious and even frightened. You slide the headphones back on. There it is again. There's some high-pitched frequency you hear as well. You rip them back off, thinking this is just a joke. It's gone again. You slide them back on and turn the volume on your speakers all the way down. You even break off the switch trying to make the sound disappear, but it remains. But then suddenly you notice something. Something you feel stupid for not noticing before. Your headphones aren't even plugged in. But wait, the wire, it's dangling straight out, stretching into the darkness elsewhere. You try to pull it towards you, but nothing. You must have gotten it stuck on something, you think. But when was I even over in that area? You walk blindly into the darkness, using the wire as a guide through. The wire is longer than you once remembered, much longer than how you remember. What the hell is this, you say in your head. The further you go, you finally feel something on the wire. It's a heavy, gooey, mucky, liquid solid matter. You pick up your hand and bring it close to your face to see what the substance is. It's dark, and it glistens off the glow of your computer screen, which is now a lot farther away from you than it should be. You glance at your computer's setup and back at your hand, but in that quick glance at your computer's setup, you noticed something. You saw something there, standing there and staring at the dark and dull light radiating off of your computer monitor. Not only did you see something, but you heard something as well, a heavy, gooey, mucky dripping sound. You look back at your computer's setup as the tall, man-like figure there glistens in the light. Story 3. Mirror. Nearer, I rushed over to the wall to flick the light switch. Something was in my room, watching me. It was lurking somewhere behind me, sitting in the shadows, and staring at me. This was more than just paranoia. There was definitely something there. I could almost envision wrapping its arms around me and dragging me into some terrifying abyss. I sat in my chair and stared at my shadow on the ground in front of me. I watched as another shadow slowly grew over my shoulder, never taking on any definite shape. I looked back up and stared at my computer screen. I thought maybe that if I believed it wasn't there, it would just go away. I held my breath and tried to engross myself in reading the article on the website in front of me. I couldn't help but notice how my computer screen showed a reflection of what was in front of it. I couldn't help but notice the worried look on my face. I couldn't help but notice the thing hovering behind me, staring at the back of my head. I could tell it knew I knew it was there. I screamed and threw myself against the wall and slid to the bottom. I was crying now. Scanning the room, I searched for the thing that was behind me, but I found nothing. My room was empty, except for a mirror. My eyes lingered over the mirror on the wall across from me. I watched my black fin twirl around and around through the mirror. I watched how the shadow of the fan moved all around the room. I watched how the mirror slowly began to tilt till I could see myself in it. I watched as a dark, scaly hand grasped my shoulder. I was entranced by my own reflection. All I could do was sit there as I watched the black abomination cup my face. I screamed at my reflection to move as I watched a face made from the darkness. Itself whisper into my reflection's ear. I gazed in horror as my reflection stood up and walked to the window. I gasped in pain when he smashed the glass with his fist. I tried to hide my eyes when I saw him pick up a broken piece of glass. I tried to look away, and he forced me to stare into his eyes. I sensed his thoughts in my head. They said to me that if I was afraid to look, then I don't need to look. Everything became tinted red when my reflection brought the jagged object across his eyelids, yet there was no blood. Not for him, he just smiled. He walked back over to the black abomination. It again drew him near and whispered into his ear. I could see it chuckle. I cried in despair when I saw a tear roll down my reflection's face. I cried in pain when he jabbed the jagged glass into his throat. I awoke in a cold sweat and rushed to the wall to flick the light switch. Story 4. My attempt at 2-sentence horror stories. While up late working at your computer, you see one of those disgusting, many-legged house centipedes skittering around on your floor, and resolve to kill it before it gets away. Wielding a rolled-up magazine, you chase the centipede under the bed, but as you stick your arm and head into the dark void beneath the bed skirts, you are seized with a sharp, sudden dread and quickly withdraw back into the brightly lit room, only to discover that now they are everywhere. Tanya woke to the sound of some talk show murmuring unintelligibly from the half-muted speakers of her alarm clock radio, and reached across blearily to shut it off. It wasn't until her hand brushed over a cold, clammy something resting on top of her knit stand that she remembered she was in a hotel room, and it didn't have a radio. Someone had told Jason that if he put a small animal in the microwave, it would explode, and Jason, having always been a little bastard, tested this claim on his older sister's pet rabbit. However, though he watched for nearly an hour, all that happened was that the rabbit became more and more frantic in the enclosed space, until an exasperated Jason sullenly opened the little door to return the rabbit to its cage. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, no one had told Jason that you had to turn on the microwave to achieve this effect, or how deeply into a tiny, exposed wrist a pissed-off rabbit could bite. Brandon stayed up until 3 a.m. playing on Xbox Live with his friend Dustin, both boys chatting, yelling, and provoking each other over their headsets the entire time. The next morning, when Brandon called to arrange a playdate, Dustin's mother answered the phone and tearfully informed him that Dustin had died choking on a wad of bubble gum. At 9 p.m. the previous night, Susie received a realistic talking baby doll as a Christmas gift from her father that year. However, try as she might, the doll couldn't fill the void left behind by the baby that Susie's father had killed and buried in the basement after discovering the 17-year-old's unplanned pregnancy. Over his car radio, Marcus heard the DJ announce that a serial killer with short blonde hair and a skull tattoo on his right cheek had recently escaped from a nearby prison. He frowned and anxiously placed one hand on the pistol he kept at his hip as the young woman in his passenger seat gazed at his profile with mounting terror and prepared to do God only knew what in her panic. Don't think of a pink elephant. It's the oldest trick in the book. As soon as you read that phrase, a pink elephant immediately pops into your head. Now, don't think of a sanity-devouring psychic parasite attached to the back of your mind like a shadow. What little time you have left will be more pleasantly spent forgetting that one of those just popped into your head, too. Story 5. There's nothing left. I've always been a creature of habit, and few observations ever elude my mind. That's why I can recall any event down to the smallest insignificant detail. But recently my memories haven't matched up with reality. On any given weekday, I'll return from work. My keys will be in my left inner coat pocket. I'll open the door, retrieve the mail from the assortment of mailboxes on the left side of the entrance. My apartment number is 7, just like the mailbox. Following this, I'll travel up the stairs to the first floor, 11 steps. I always start with my left hand and with my left. At least I thought so, because a few days ago I tripped, not because I'm clumsy, but because on that day I ended the staircase with my right foot. Of course, I doubted myself, but it was enough to recheck the amount of steps in the staircase, and sure enough, one was missing. At this point I could have talked to my neighbors, but they weren't the detail-oriented kind, so I let it slide. It was a minor change, one I quickly adapted to, at least until I lost my wristwatch. The prior night I put it on my nightstand, and the following morning it was simply gone. It wasn't impossible that I misplaced it, but I had a firm memory of placing it on the nightstand. Everything escalated today. I woke up, took a shower, shaved, brushed my teeth, cut my nails on all 9 fingers. 9 fingers, one of them had disappeared, with no trace, just healthy skin covering the barren knuckle. Not knowing who to call, I turned to my mother. My voice trembled as I explained what had happened. She went quiet for a few seconds before responding with worrying in her words. She told me I was born with only 9 fingers. I hung up. It was dark. I sat down trying to remember. Had I simply forgotten? Does there's something wrong with my mind? Only after minutes did I realize I was sitting in the dark, but it was daytime. My apartment didn't have any windows anymore. Panic set in. This wasn't in my head. They don't even make windowless apartments. I tried to escape, but there was no door to flee through. I was trapped in a nicely decorated brick box that was my apartment. I called the police. They claimed my address didn't exist. After they hung up, I would have called someone else if my telephone wasn't already gone. My computer is all that exists, and I am trying to write this story with the stumps that were once my hands. Only one middle finger left, a perfect fuck you to myself. I'll have to post while my computer still exists. But think about this. Have you lost anything recently, such as your favorite mug, maybe a blue pen, something that just disappeared without a trace? That's how it started for me, too. Scott Saxon, Story 6. Branches in the wind. Finally, I'm home. After working a late night, I finally finished a project that my boss pushed on me. It was all worth it, though. because I had a great day ahead of me. The part I was most excited for, though, was seeing my son. I finally won the custody battle against my ex-wife, so now I actually get to see him. I fixed up my old spare bedroom for him. Although it looked bland and all white, I figured we would have some spare time later, and we could make any changes he wanted. I lumbered up the stairs, and when he finally heard I was here, he quickly called me into his room. "Daddy, I can't sleep. There's a monster in the window." Monsters, huh? That's original for a kid. Oh, don't worry about that. It's just the trees' branches blowing in the wind. See, I pointed and showed him the branch tapping against the window pane. He trusted me enough to calm himself down, and I kissed him good night. Finally, time for sleep. I could hardly even see straight at this point. I walked across the hallway and collapsed into my bed. I had too much on my plate to be dealing with monsters. I had to go with him to school the next day to get him signed up in our district. I had to buy him school clothes. I couldn't even think straight. That's when I heard him calling again. Man, I love the kid and all, but I needed some sleep. "Daddy, the monster is back again," he shrieked. I looked to the window. Nope, nothing but the tree's branches. I walked over, and to prove it to him, I opened the window and turned back to him. "See, it's nothing but the tree. I told you. Now go to sleep. You've got school in the morning." He was still a little startled from what I could see, but what could I do? I was just too damn tired. Again, I fell into the comfort of my bed. Then I heard a cry, and I had just had enough. "Fine, I'll just sleep in your bed with you. If you see any monsters, just hold tight to me." I walked back into his room, pulled back his red blanket, and lay next to the kid. While I lay eyes closed, my mind started wandering. Didn't I buy white sheets for the bed? I looked at my son's slit neck and realized my mistake. That's when I heard the monster, except it wasn't tapping at the glass. It was the footsteps from the open window. I couldn't help but laugh. How didn't I realize I had no trees in my yard? Story 7. The Muffin Man. You stand in front of the alleyway, slowly stepping into the darkness. You have always hated this part of your walk home from work, but every day you gather up your courage and ignore your instinct to be afraid. Walking quickly, you keep your eyes fixed on the ground, but as soon as you hear footsteps, your head whips back at the blackness behind you. Through the darkness, you can barely make out a figure about 30 feet away. It's huge and round. Looking at its shadow cast on the wall, you could see something coming off of its face, something long and feather-like. You realize it was just a mustache. You continue down the alley, intent on the idea that it was just a fat man walking the same way as you. But the footsteps grow louder, and faintly in the distance, you can hear the soft sound of, what is that? Children singing? No, not just children. The sounds enveloping you now resemble that of men and women of many ages. Some are high-pitched, and others are low, but they are all singing the same tune. The song brings a wave of nostalgia over you. You used to sing this song every day when you were a kid, but your flashback ends when the voices began to turn sinister. They sounded like they were extremely pained, as if they had fallen off their roof into a pile of garbage 3 times over, and then were forced to sing a song. No, it was worse than that. They were wailing and screaming, as if they had been forced to listen to the Nyan Cat song for 5 hours straight, locked in a closet with Will Ferrell slowly licking their ear. Your pace starts to quicken up until you are running full speed away from this thing. But it is much faster. Within 1 second, it's right in front of you. It is hideous. What you thought was its fat belly is actually an enormous muffin. His arms and legs stick out of it, and it reaches up to its neck. But one tail end particular strikes you as strange. On its side, there was a dent in the muffin, and it looked like someone went up and took a bite out of it. Blood drips from the wound and stains the delicate confection. You scream at the sight of it, but every sound you made was drowned out by the voices. It walks closer, grabbing you with its chubby little hand. Before you can react, it holds you up 3 feet in the air. It smiles menacingly at you before shoving you into the hole on its side. You fall down onto a pile of bodies that scream as you land on them. You try to get up and escape, but something holds you in place. That same something begins to make you sing. You try to scream, but all that comes out is a wailing noise to the tune you know all too well. Do you know the muffin, M-A-N-N-N-N-N-N-N, the muffin men?